Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. Tonight, for Friday, September 3rd, we have Mr. Steve Clark coming in for a visit over the course of the next hour or so. Steve was recently named the play-by-play voice for McMaster University football, volleyball, and basketball. So we'll talk to him about his new gig, his excitement for the new Canadian Collegiate Athletics year, and his previous ties to McMaster and Marauders Athletics. He's also called games at Canada's World Junior Hockey Championship Selection Camp. I'll ask him his thoughts on the recently completed World Women's Hockey Championships, and of course the gold medal game between Canada and the US, which featured a dramatic overtime winning goal called by the great Rod Black on TSN. And we'll also chat about the OHL, the Ontario Hockey League, starting up in short order. The voice of the Niagara Ice Dogs. We'll talk about his time in the OHL, and as well his couple of seasons with the Hamilton Bulldogs when they were in the American Hockey League. We'll get our hockey talk fix in, and much more on your way over the course of the next 60 minutes or so. We appreciate your viewership as always. Before we go to our first break and bring in Steve on the other side, just a quick reminder to check out all of our episodes of VTM, plus all of our other ASTV shows and game broadcasts over at astvproductions.com and Facebook. Further updates can be found as well by following ASTV on Twitter and on Instagram. We have a great show lined up. Excited to get our chat started with Steve Clark. Thanks so much for tuning us in. We're going to toss to a break and come right back on the other side with Steve. Thanks so much for watching BTM. And once again, welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. Jonathan Hodgson back along with you, and joined now for this week's chat by Steve Clark, new voice of McMaster University Athletics and voice of the Niagara Ice Dogs in the Ontario Hockey League. Steve, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. What a great setup ASTV is. I'm looking forward to the next little while, Jonathan. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun over the course of the last number of months to catch up with a number of great sportscasters. And as you and I were talking about before coming on, the more prep I did into this week's episode, the more I found in your past, in your experience. So I'm really excited to talk to you about a number of things.
I don't know if that makes me experienced or it makes me old, but I'm always happy to talk about the people and the radio stations and TV stations and universities that have given me the opportunity to speak about their products and for calling games. It's there's no better thing in the world.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into your latest thing here in short order here in the first segment. But of course, with this being the Labor Day weekend, just kind of checking in on you. Obviously, you're giving us an hour of your time on the Friday night. Many thanks for that. But what's on the docket for your long weekend?
Well, being free on a Friday night might be a sneak preview into how quiet the weekend is going to be here for myself and my family. But it's an opportunity to kind of relax and kick back. My daughter is a rep hockey goalie, and she's finishing up a 3-on-3 season in which she actually gets to play out. And she's really looking forward to that. So we've got that to look forward to on Sunday, and I'm sure we'll see maybe some friends and family in and around the area, but no real travel plans because come Tuesday I'm also a high school teacher, so it's back to the grind for me, and then my daughter goes back to school as well. So all in all, it'll be a nice, hopefully quiet, relaxing weekend.
Now you're in Ontario. Whereabouts in Ontario are you at?
I'm in a town called Waterdown. I'm not going to call it a little town anymore because it's one of the fastest growing towns. It's right beside, basically, it's a part of the city of Hamilton, and it's about, I would say, 45 minutes or so away from Toronto. But it's one of those places that started off as a little town, but because it's close to, public transit and close to major highways, then a lot of people seem to want to move here. It's a beautiful little community that we've been here for 13 years, and I don't think we're leaving anytime soon.
Are you a CFL fan at all?
I am absolutely Oski Wee Wee.
So, Ticats fan. I should have guessed with
Yes.
your hockey ties. So big weekend coming up. Argos Ticats after last season was wiped out in the CFL. Nice to have that part of Canadian tradition back underway.
Yeah, I think they said the Ticats said it's something like the first time in 670 odd days that they've actually hosted a home game because their first three games were on the road. So, and then to kick it off with the great rivalry with with the Toronto Argos, they're only allowing 15,000, which is about half the capacity of Tim Hortons Field where they play. But I guarantee you they'll sound like about 40,000. And with the Ticats getting into the win column against Montreal, things are a little bit more relaxed in Steel Town because they didn't look very good the first couple of weeks. So hopefully a win against the Argos, square the record at 2-2, and then we go from there because they are hosting the Grey Cup this year, whether they're in it or not.
Yep, for sure. And your note there about it sounding better or bigger than it's going to be in terms of crowd is something that we've seen and heard from a number of other places, including some team that's very close to my heart in fandom and in past experience, the Blue Jays, allowing 15,000
Yeah.
people into their games thus far. But with the way they're concentrating them, we've heard a lot of comments coming out of those games with the way they're dispersed and with the fact that people are just so excited to get back, and the Blue Jays are kind of in the hunt. We've heard a lot of people talk about how it feels so much better than your typical 15,000 night.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, the runs that the Blue Jays made in 2015 and 2016, Jonathan, were really special. So of course, this run with a reduced crowd, kind of has a little bit, a little bit missing from what was happening five or so years ago. But yeah, very exciting. I still consider the Blue Jays in a race. I mean, they have to play awfully well over the last 25, 30 games, but they certainly have the hitting to do it, the starting pitching to do it, and the bullpen might be a conversation for another time. But here's hoping they squeak into the playoffs too.
Yeah, they're going to be an exciting team for hopefully the next few years. I think it's built a little bit differently this time. Like the last playoff era just kind of went off like a bottle rocket. It was
Yep.
in my view, it kind of looked like the previous GM, Alex Anthopoulos, might have seen the tea leaves and just said, you know what, before I go, I'm going to have fun, and made all the moves, got everybody. There was already veterans there, and they made the best of it with the window they had left. Whereas this one is much more fundamentally built. They have young stars, obviously. So, yeah, it would be fun to see them make a playoff, even make a wild card game this year. That would be fun. It would be worth it for the experience. But the way this team is set up, I think this is, no matter what happens this year, this is just the tip of the iceberg for them.
Well, you know what? I can go back. I can remember I was in my early 20s when the Blue Jays won their two World Series in 1992 and 1993. And those teams were certainly loaded up with fantastic players and players who played in key situations. Paul Molitor, Dave Winfield, Jack Morris, David Cohn, all those great players. But it took a few years for them to get to that spot. So hopefully you're right, the Blue Jays are at the ascendancy of this peak, and they'll be contenders for a few more years. But what a fun team they've been to watch this year, and watching Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette and Teoscar Hernandez and others, and watching Robbie Ray really kind of, get the magic back that he had lost through injury and control problems the last couple of years. It's fantastic.
Absolutely, that'll be fun to watch for sure. But here in this first segment, talking with Steve Clark from McMaster University Athletics and the Niagara Ice Dogs. First off, I wanted to get into your big news of the week. Recently, you announced on Twitter that you're going to be a play-by-play voice for 3 different sports at McMaster University. Just kind of give us the overview of what your role's going to be at McMaster for this coming year.
Yeah, Jonathan, thanks for noticing that, and thanks for asking me. First of all, I said I'm a McMaster grad, so there's a little bit of pride for me to be able to work with McMaster. And for 3 years, from 2016 to 2018, I called their football games and their basketball games, actually stretching into early 2019, for TSN 1150. Now that station has since closed up shop, switched formats, and it's now a business station. So I missed the 2019 season, dealing with some health issues, and then the 2020 season really got wiped out. So when I kind of approached McMaster and said, "Hey, what are your broadcasting needs?" They said that they were going to focus on OUA TV, which is the kind of the Ontario University Athletics, kind of their own station, which they pretty well show just about every game. I believe, football, soccer, basketball, volleyball, some of the bigger sports. So then they said, well, we need somebody for the home games for football, and for the home dates for basketball with double headers, and also for volleyball. Would you like to be, and the way they build it was kind of the voice of the Marauders. And I thought, there's no better thing for me to be, no kind of prouder distinction than I can have, other than a degree from McMaster University, than to be, the main voice of a team and a program that I go back to my student days in the early to mid 90s, when I started calling stuff for the campus radio station 93.3 CFMU. So McMaster always has kind of been a part of my life when I was a student, and then after I graduated. So this opportunity, to work with a football team that's fantastic, to work with 2 really national caliber basketball teams, and the same with volleyball. And that's not me spreading a little McMaster propaganda early. The programs really are that good and that respected. And for me to be able to be the voice that will bring, fans all over Ontario, and McMaster grads and McMaster alumni those games is really fantastic for me. And I'm so looking forward to that opportunity.
Now, did you play sports in your time in to McMaster, or even growing up, or what's your kind of athletic background before going behind the mic?
It's a very quick story, I can tell you that. I was your typical, I would say, average to decent athlete. I played soccer, I played tennis, I played hockey for a few years, but not at the house league level. basketball recreationally, but always liked talking sports. I had a friend of mine, and it's weird because we met in grade 4, and we're still actually friends today, and like 40 odd years later. And we love statistics, and we love baseball statistics. So we were the type of guys who liked a lot of broadcasters. I'm sure probably like yourself as well, who were fascinated by the numbers of the game, wanted to stay involved in the game, but obviously knew that it was never going to be even close as a player. So broadcasting kind of became the next kind of window for me to look into sports, and that's what I chose. But as an athlete, my highlight reel is pretty short as an athlete. It's let's just say I chose wisely when I chose that I was better served talking about sports than playing them.
You're not alone in that kind of story. It's amazing how many times we get that exact line when
Yeah.
we ask about the push or the reasoning to go into broadcasting. Oftentimes, as well, I just wasn't gonna go this far as a player, and I know there's been a lot of fun lines from Bob Uecker, the voice of
Hmm.
the Milwaukee Brewers, him kind of poking fun at his career as a very short-lived career as a catcher. But it's always fun to hear those backgrounds. Your three sports that you're going to be doing this year at McMaster, three pretty different types of sports to call. In football, volleyball, and basketball, do you, as a broadcaster, do you have a natural sport, a favorite sport, and is there any that kind of stretch you and challenge you to call?
Well, I mean, my first experience actually at McMaster University was with basketball. And so I've always loved calling basketball. I've been fortunate. I coached basketball at the high school level, so I learned a lot about the X's and O's and some of the other nuances of the game. So that really helped. Football, I think for me, the goal is to call what happens. And then, if I have a good analyst, and I only say if it's because I am going to be working alone for most of these broadcasts. But before, if I had a good analyst, I would step aside and let them take it because they know the sports and they know why the play happened. I just have to describe the play. So that's going to be a bit of a learning curve for me in terms of having to be able to analyze and fill that time a little bit. Volleyball probably will be the biggest challenge. I have called some volleyball. I used to do some work with York University, called some of their volleyball games, filled in at McMaster. And the one thing I will say is I believe that volleyball, if produced and if it's done right with people in the stands, it's a very underrated and very good live television property. I mean, there's points scored, every time somebody serves. It's fast paced, it's athletic, it's quick. It has all of those things that gets the crowd involved, and I'm looking forward to it. But I know that that's where I'm going to have to study up the most to know some of the terminology and some of the other kind of subtleties and tactics of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing you said there that kind of strikes a chord with me from my experience, primarily being a baseball guy in my past, was talking about calling games alone versus with a partner. And in baseball, it's very much it's one of the few sports where the broadcaster, you have to carry the game. So I always found when I was doing baseball games alone, I got into a pretty good rhythm because it
Yeah.
was me and the game. Obviously, it's a challenge. It's a lot of talking. Your homework is enormous, but I
Hmm.
always felt really comfortable of just me and the game. And then you bring
Yeah.
in a partner, and it's kind of you got this forward relationship with you in the game, but now you also have this sideways dynamic of you and your partner and the game. Have you had any thoughts or experience with the differences in your career, whether it's these sports we just talked about or whether it's hockey, with the differences between calling alone and with a partner?
I've almost always had a partner that I've worked with, and for me, that chemistry with that partner is the most important thing. And I've been fortunate to work with great people, and we've developed that on-air chemistry and that rhythm. But I thought you really raised, Jonathan, an excellent point when you talked about broadcasting alone, with it's just you and the game, and you do establish this rhythm. And if it's a TV broadcast, then hopefully sometimes the pictures can tell the story, and you don't really need to fill every single moment of time, because after a little while, there's only so many things that you can observe on a baseball field. So you don't want to become redundant. And again, I think that'll be the same with me calling things alone. You're also brought up a fantastic point about the homework. The research is going to be a little bit more extensive. You always have to kind of rely on kind of backup storylines if you have a one-sided game. Now, if I have a one-sided game and I'm by myself, then I'm really going to have to rely on some of those secondary, notes and research that I make. So that's going to be the challenge. But I've always enjoyed working with people and working with other broadcasters. I'm fortunate, and I know I'm jumping around a bit, but the guy I call Niagara Ice Dogs games with, Ed Burkholder, we've been calling games together now for 13 years. And for some reason, something just kind of clicked right off the top. And we're able to kind of work back and forth very, very effectively. But it's definitely going to be a challenge to be alone, but I am looking forward to it. I just hope it's not too much of a challenge for the people to have to listen to me for a whole game.
Oh man, kind of bringing it back to your McMaster seasons coming up. Before we go to our next break, just kind of what's your yearly schedule look like? When do things? I imagine football might be the first one to fire up, or am I wrong?
Yeah, football will be the first one. I'm only doing the home games. So McMaster plays the first couple of games on the road on the 18th, and then they have a week off on the 25th. The first football game is on October the 2nd. And I think there's the three games are in October. And of course, playoffs are then to be determined. And who knows, somebody else might come in and pick up a playoff game, one of the bigger broadcasters, depending on what agreements are made. But October is when it gets started, and then kind of into middle of November. Both basketball and volleyball kind of work somewhat at the same time. So that's going to be probably the busier portion of my schedule, and that will carry me through, post into 2022 and post Christmas and into the New Year, probably all the way through, kind of February. But at least it's just the home event, so you kind of get a chance to take a deep breath and things like that. But it'll definitely be a busy season. But as I said, it's going to be a nice transition from football and then to basketball and volleyball.
Absolutely excited for that. Steve, we got to take our first break here, but we'll be back on the other side and move the conversation along to get it back on the ice and talk a little bit of Team Canada. There was some good stuff that came out of the women's worlds this week that we want to get into. So we're going to toss it to another break here, and we'll be back on the other side with more with Steve Clark here on Behind the Mic.
Why go solar? Solar is better than ever. Our revolutionary design and inverter equipment with the latest in solar panel technology for the ultimate in-home and business security. That's right, I said security. Grid security and security of your home are linked. Fortify your future today with a battery backup system. No maintenance. Quiet running. Did you know in Manitoba, grid-connected, off-grid, and battery backup systems are 100% right off in the year you purchase for any company or farm? Do you want to back up your internet, keep your tills running, and the lights on? We can install a system that is right for you, with battery backup fully capable of taking on all those essential loads and keeping you running. When you call our experts at Evolve Green, ask about getting your free energy audit today. Call or email today to find out what system works best for you. 1-866-5EVOLVE or support@evolvegreen.ca. Also, be sure to check out our website at www.evolvegreen.ca.
Back here on Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions, Jonathan Hodgson, your host, joined this week by Steve Clark from McMaster University Athletics and the Niagara Ice Dogs in the OHL. And Steve, we're going to get it on the ice now in the second block, but the OHL and junior can wait for a moment. I wanted to start it off with some stuff that came out of the Women's World Championships that played their gold medal game on Tuesday with Canada with the OT win over the U.S. Were you watching that tournament and watching that game?
I was watching a lot of the tournament. I said my daughter's a hockey player. We love watching hockey in all forms, and to have a chance to watch elite women play the best in the world was, something that we had already planned to watch, and we kind of split a little bit, Jonathan. The first game we actually rolled a TV outside and kind of watched the game outside, and then watched a couple games inside, and then we would go to a local sports bar to watch, some of the games, couple of the games too, and that's where we were with the final. So initially, in the final, we were kind of watching it, just a lot without audio. So when that game-winning goal in overtime, I'm going to say, happened, we were all very confused about what was going on, and it wasn't until a little bit later when I got home, and of course, being the broadcasting guy that I am, I wanted to listen how it was conveyed to the audience by Rod Black. So then we got a chance to watch it and listen to it that way. But hey, what a great tournament! Once again, Canada and the U.S. Didn't disappoint in the final. It was a fantastic game, and just happy that Canada was able to come out on top for the first time in a little while.
Yeah, for sure. It was great to see that the women got that tournament in finally after being canceled and pushed back a couple of times due to COVID-related things. They finally got it in Calgary. And you mentioned, of course, Marie-Philippe Poulin with the overtime winner to win the gold medal. But it wasn't official for about 20, 30 seconds or so. And you and myself, I was watching it on TSN as well. And the great Rod Black, who has been on this show before and given us an hour of his time on trade deadline day in the NBA, he was on the call, and you shared it on Twitter, something that was spot on in my opinion. The replay of his 10 seconds right after that shot that went in, but of course they had to review it in live time as the play was still going on to verify. And so just kind of explain what caught your eye about Rod's call of that final goal that wasn't confirmed until a little bit later in the sequence.
Well, I mean, one thing all broadcasters kind of have in the back of their mind, when they're calling a big game is how is that big moment going to be called? Because it's going to be the call that more than likely will be, the one that's remembered, the one that's played over and over again. So I was really, really impressed with Rod Black because, as you said, there was an awful lot going on in that 20, 30 second period between, Marie-Philippe Poulin getting that pass, coming in, taking that shot, thinking that she had scored, and then realizing that the goal was not called good on the ice. And I thought that Rod did a great job. The voice rose as she came in. She took the shot. He had thought it gone in. She had thought it gone in. And he was able to convey rather than make the big call and say what happened, he explained what happened. He said, she thinks it's gone in. And then as she starts to skate back, the camera stays on her. And then he basically said it again. They're not counting the goal, even though she knows it's gone in. So I thought he gave the perfect, amount of information in that 10-second period to really let the viewers know exactly what had happened in a moment in which, you come up for the big moment and then you've really got to change kind of your momentum and then your approach to the game. And then I've never seen, I don't know if you've ever seen it before, Jonathan, where they just kind of blow a horn in the middle of the play and the game's over, right? I guess they figured, they'd gone a long time whistle free before in the overtime. Like, we don't want to go another 5 minutes or so and then finally blow it down. So I just thought he did a really good job in a frenetic situation of conveying what the viewers needed to hear.
Yeah, you're right. And I as well, I thought that was a great job of him right in the moment in that first 10 seconds, giving the pertinent info of what had happened and what is going to go on, but he never lost the flow of the game because
Exactly.
the game kept going. Even with that review kind of hanging over people's heads, the game kept going. And so he did a great job of informing while staying in the flow and never the composure was perfect. So I really appreciate.
Yeah, he never got flustered, right? Which is something that's easy to do.
And it brings up a thought and a question of, I know you have a range of different hockey things in your career. Have you ever been in a spot where, whether it's a playoff game, a clincher, an overtime situation, have you ever been calling a game where you had the opportunity to start thinking about that final call? Like you were saying, Rod had the chance to. He knew he was gonna. He knew he was gonna be calling an overtime winner for the gold medal. So it could be easy to start thinking about what's my last call going to sound like. What's your kind of philosophy on signature calls, and have you had experience with them?
Well, I can tell you I've had a chance to call a few championship games in basketball back, when I was in university. The radio station, the McMaster basketball team was good. They went out to the national championships and made, 3 or 4 finals. They never won in those finals, but I did have that experience. But I will tell you the one time, the 2019 McMaster women's basketball team were the #1 seed, and we were covering the whole tournament on TSN 1150. They went to the final against Laval, and I did start to think about what I was going to say at the end, and I made, I would say, the classic broadcaster mistake in that I overthought it. And rather than let what would come out naturally, I tried to kind of script a little something, and it didn't come out nearly as well as I thought it was going to, and it didn't come out nearly as well as it should have, and it was 100% on me because I overthought the moment. So if I had to say, if I have a chance, and I certainly hope I have a chance to do it again, I would, just acknowledge that there could be a big moment, but then just kind of let the moment ride and let what happens comes out naturally. Because when I had a chance to call that championship moment, it didn't come out as natural. It came out a little bit scripted, and I really tried to fit a little bit too much information in towards the end, as opposed to kind of letting things breathe themselves.
I remember a conversation that I had with my day one broadcasting friend and mentor, Jerry Howarth, formerly from the Blue Jays radio crew. And he's called World Series and things like that. And when I was just a young green broadcaster back right at the start, he would always tell me to not try to script big moments, not try to script, even double play balls or things like that. Just, be in the moment and call what you see. Don't try to think in advance what you're going to say. And when you say something that's natural in the moment, when you say something once in a while, you're gonna, after the inning or after you say it, you're gonna realize, hey, that felt good. That sounded good.
Yeah.
You'll stumble into some things. And that's where he had a few signature calls that he would sprinkle in, but none of them were contrived. They were all things that just fell out one night, and they ended up sticking because they were natural. And my first 2 seasons calling summer collegiate baseball, I got to call 2 championships my first 2 years. It was the greatest intro to that kind of stuff I could have asked for. And you have some in your hockey time. You have some experience at Canada's World Junior Selection Camp, calling some of the exhibition games during Canada's selection camp. Can I explain kind of what those assignments look like?
Yeah, I was, kind of fortunate that back in 2018, I believe it was, leading into the 2019 tournament, that the training camp was going to be in St. Catharines at the Meridian Center, where I call a lot of the ice dog games. So I kind of approached TSN and said, hey, I know you're showing, the games against the U Sports University kind of all-star team, and then you're showing the game they played at, I believe it was against Denmark, that they were playing in one of the pre-tournament games before getting ready to go, across and do a few other games. And I said, how would you like me to, put my voice to it, and call those games for you? And they agreed that it would be a good idea to have sound along with some visuals. So there I was, and it's interesting because we talked about solo broadcasts, and I called those games solo. I had a microphone in my hand. Because I was kind of set up on the concourse level. I wasn't in the broadcast booth area. I was set up on the concourse level, so I had a chair, but I don't usually sit, when I broadcast. And because I didn't have any place to kind of put my notes, I actually borrowed a music stand, where musicians put their music, and use that, and then broadcast the game from there. And it was a great experience. We all know how big the World Junior Championship is in Canada, and how many people watch it, on TSN, and how it's become a summer tradition. So I was lucky to be a small part of it. Called 2 great games against the U Sports All Stars, and then a pre-tournament game against Denmark, and before Canada went off and played in the tournament. I believe that was the year it was in Buffalo. So it was a wonderful experience. There's nothing like calling Team Canada games, and all those great players that we talk about, and being a part of that training camp. And I would probably count it as one of the top 2 or 3 memorable kind of broadcasting experiences that I've ever had.
Yeah, what team was that again? Refresh my memory on some of the names that were at that camp.
Oh, that's a great question. I know that Carter Hart was the goaltender that year, and I know, again, and this is, it was a team. I think it was Kale Mccarr might have been on that team. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of lose a little bit of the memories as well, but those are the 2 that really kind of stand out, for me. So I know it was a deep team. I know it was a well-balanced team, and I'm pretty sure they won the tournament that year. So shame on me for not remembering more names.
Now those are 2 good names that kind of trigger for me as well. Kale Mccarr, I kind of have fun thinking about him because he played Junior A in Brooks, and I grew up in Okotoks, which is their arch rival in the Alberta Junior League, and so I'm friends with a couple of goalies who took shots against Kale Mccarr in Junior A, and we kind of laugh about those memories. And then Carter Hart played in the WHL with Everett, and I was at the CHL's longest game ever, playoff game between the Victoria Royals and the Everett Silvertips, and that was Carter Hart against Griffin Outhouse, who's right now probably the greatest goalie in Victoria Royals history. And I just remember being at that 5 overtime game, and kind of having plans for after the game, and kind of having to make decisions on the fly as to when do I pull the pin, or when do I scrub the other plans. And being a gamer, I stuck it out, and the other plans had to go on the shelf.
And you remember that there was always a couple broadcasters who had to broadcast that game as well, whose voices probably got to work out, calling a 5 overtime game, which thankfully I've never called. I think triple overtime is the most that I've called. But 5 overtime takes stamina as a player, a broadcaster, a referee, and yes, even as a fan.
Oh, absolutely. Before we go to our next break, I wanted to go to one more thing here. You have some Fiba basketball on your resume. What was that? What were those assignments about?
Yeah, that was the 2019 FIBA under 18 basketball. Was it under 18? Yeah, under 18 basketball championship qualifiers. And again, right back there was in the Meridian Center in St. Catharines. And, I approached because I knew that Niagara College was doing the production for it. I approached and said, you've got a lot of games. You're broadcasting them all. Can I help you out? And they said yes. I didn't actually get a chance to do any Canada games. A fellow by the name of Jason Thom, who was very well versed in the basketball scene in Canada, was calling all of the Canada games, but I got to call a US game, and it was a game for the ages for all of the wrong reasons. The score after the first quarter, I believe, was around 41-0 for the US. They were playing against, I believe, Panama. And this U.S. under-18 team was a team made up of guys who were pretty well going to the D1 top schools, Duke, North Carolina, Indiana, et cetera, et cetera. So it was an incredibly talented team that was coached by Bill Self, who was the coach of, Kansas at the time. So that was fun, and I got to call the bronze medal game in that one. U.S. and Canada played in the final, and the U.S. actually won fairly convincingly, but great tournament for Canada. So again, an opportunity to call high-level basketball, like that, under 18s, the incredible amount of talent that we have, not only in Canada, but really, all over North and into South America. Argentina, I believe, won that bronze medal or third place game, and they had an outstanding team. And there's some of these kids who are 18 years old and a couple of 7-footers and, a couple of other guys who trying to think are probably getting ready to be hopefully drafted by the NBA. And again, it was just a good quality tournament that I fortunately had the opportunity to be a part of. I love the experience. I love the basketball and had a ton of fun.
Yeah, that I've watched some of the games and tournaments from FIBA action. Of course, one of the Olympic qualifying tournaments was just in Victoria this summer, and
That's right.
Canada unable to qualify for the Olympics this time around, but they've locked up Nick Nurse, who agreed to sign on for one more Olympic cycle to try to get in the Olympics next time around. I think the Raptors are kind of have brought basketball out of the shadows in this country. Hockey will always be king, and baseball is in really good shape and trending the right direction in Canada in terms of talent, in terms of even domestic teams. And I think basketball's right there too as well, with
Absolutely.
what you said about the direction the teams are going, and you look at the levels of talent in the NBA and the types of players who are going to the national team now, and I think they just need to keep that going in the same direction.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I think they'll get there. Hopefully, they'll get some more commitment from the men's basketball players. The women, a very talented team as well, and they didn't fare so well in the Olympics, unfortunately. But as we all know, Jonathan, building a program is a process, and both teams are in that process.
Absolutely. All right, one more break here on Behind the Mic. I'll come back with one more segment, talk a little bit of hockey and a couple of your other projects, and we'll wrap it up for another week. On the other side, one more segment with Steve Clark here on Behind the Mic on ASTV. Back here on Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions, in conversation this week with Steve Clark from McMaster University Athletics and the Niagara Ice Dogs. It's been a great 40 minutes or so talking about a bunch of different things, and we still haven't gotten to any hockey. So we'll do that here over any junior hockey, I should say. And so we'll get to that here in our last block. But just carrying over one thought that I had in the last segment that I didn't get a chance to bring up was when you were talking about doing some junior national team selection camp games and talking about the setup you had there or the lack of setup and having to improvise and make it work. And I think there's a good lesson in that for especially young aspiring broadcasters. And like you said, you approached Hockey Canada and you said, hey, would you want to have a voice to these games? And I think there's a good lesson in finding your reps, and doesn't matter how it looks, and doesn't matter how small the setup might be. Just fight for those reps wherever they might be.
Yeah, create your own opportunity as well is a piece of advice I give to young broadcasters out there. I mean, this was a situation in which they were streaming the game, but they just weren't having commentators, and so I just pitched the idea, and we were off to the races. And again, you're right; it doesn't matter where you're broadcasting from. The fact of the matter was, I was holding a TSN microphone. I was at a World Junior Selection camp, and it didn't matter to me where I was. I was going to try and make it work as best as I could. But yeah, you're right. It's a great lesson in trying to be creative and as you said, getting your reps, because that's the only way that you will develop your own style, and the only way that you will get better is to just keep calling games any way that you can.
All right, the Ontario Hockey League revving up, getting ready to go this fall. And that includes your Niagara Ice Dogs. You've been there for correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere around 13 seasons or so. How excited are you to have the OHL back up?
Candy, you know what? It's fantastic. I mean, being out west, you did get some form of a season in with some of the teams in the Western Hockey League and the Quebec Hockey League. It didn't work out that way in Ontario. The cases just kept on trending in the wrong direction right around the time the Ontario Hockey League wanted to get started. I truly thought they were going to get part of a season in, but in the end, the situation was a little bit too dire. There were too many cases for them to open up hockey arenas and increase further risk. But it looks like all systems are go for this year. I think there's an excitement in the air, not only in Niagara, but for all 20 teams in the Ontario Hockey League to get back to action. There's been a lot of focus on training camps all over the league so far, and live streaming team scrimmages, and cuts being made, and all of those things that go along with a training camp. And looking forward to it's going to be a really good season. But if you're in the predictions business, Jonathan, I'm not quite sure how many predictions you want to make, because there's going to be so many unknowns really in the league. Teams are going to have upwards of 40% of their roster who have never played an OHL game, and that's going to make for some interesting viewing and interesting calling of games.
Yeah, I know from my experience following my hometown team, the Victoria Royals, and it was kind of simultaneous. They kind of hit a little bit of a retool or rebuild phase at the same time as the WHL had their shortened hub season with each division in one location. So when you combine those two factors with the rebuild phase and how much turnover there is in that anyway, combined with this team hasn't played a home game in 2 years. When they hit the ice in Victoria this in October, I've had the thought, just looking at it, like, this is going to be a little bit like an expansion team. It's going to be a little bit like that for the fans. They're going to have to basically relearn their team all over again.
Same thing with the broadcasters and the fans as well. I was looking at somebody had sent me a list of some of the Ice Dogs projected roster and some of the cuts that were made. And I'm looking at names and I thought, wow, I remember he got drafted, but I've never seen him play. I've never seen him play. And, and it's going to be that way all over the league. I mean, these guys coming into the league, the 16, 17-year-olds are immensely talented, but they always say when you're a rookie in the league, it takes you about half a season to get acclimatized to the pace. So when you have that many guys who have never played, it's going to be the first team that really gets it together, and the first kind of core of young players who really acclimatize to the league are the teams that are going to have success. But it's just going to be great to have hockey back in the rinks, and it's going to be fantastic just to be able to watch hockey, to call hockey, and as always with the Ontario Hockey League, see these young players grow and develop into potential pros.
Absolutely. We talked in our first block about covering McMaster sports and your opportunity to bounce between sports and cover a whole bunch of things. But how different is it being the voice of a team in the Ontario League, where you get to cover one team for the length of the season and really kind of become a conduit between the team and its fans? How much different is that experience being the voice of a Canadian Hockey League team?
Yeah, and I should preface this. I mean, with the TV coverage that we do, we only cover home games. The radio guys
Right.
do the home and road. But
Right.
yeah, you're right. And the challenge is, and this is what it's like. We work with a really, really good production team. Our producer Darren Sawyer, myself, color commentator Ed Burkholder, and the host Al Galloway. We've been the originals. We've been there since the beginning, so we all know each other really, really well. And so when we try to come up with game stories, we're able to, offer up a few different things. And that's the challenge when you're calling one team and you're being that voice to the people at home, is that you're trying to find different game stories and different players to focus on, because we've always felt that the broadcaster is, as you say, we're the conduit. We're the ones who convey the action. The stars are the ones on the ice, though. They're the ones that have to be, promoted. They're the ones who are hoping to get drafted. So that's kind of our focus as well, to focus on, well, why are we focusing on this player? Is it because they've been drafted by the NHL already, or they're a top pick, or is it somebody who's coming back from an injury? I mean, we have goaltender Tucker Tynan playing for the Niagara Ice Dogs. And I don't know if you remember, going back a couple of years ago, he suffered one of the most horrific injuries a goalie could have, in which a player cut into his leg so deep that there was a chance that they thought he was going to die on the ice, until a lot of quick thinking by the emergency personnel got him to the hospital. He had serious, an operation. And now, a year and a half, almost 2 years later, he's ready to play Ontario Hockey League hockey again. That's a story we need to tell. And that's all part of being around a team and calling a team, is finding those different game stories, but also not forgetting about the opposition, because our games are shown in Niagara, but they're also shown in the road market. And I don't want to come across as a super homer type of guy. So I want to provide some balance, and be able to highlight those players as well. And that's the challenge that all of us have.
Absolutely. And you also spent 2 seasons in the American Hockey League, covering the Hamilton Bulldogs back when they were an AHL team. And of course now the Hamilton Bulldogs are in the O. But how much different was that for you as a broadcaster, covering the American League for those 2 years?
It was a lot different. And, we covered, I think, 15 TV games or so a year, right? So mostly Friday night games and the odd Saturday night game and things like that. The one thing with calling professionals versus calling, junior age players, is that there's a definite different structure to the game. There's a different pacing to the game. And it's a very, as you would know, a very transitory league, in which you've got guys coming down from the NHL who are sent down either to rehab an injury or and somebody else has come back from injury. You've got guys that you're signing. You've got players who have had their NHL career, but are now just playing professional hockey because they love hockey. young draft picks who need to get those game experiences and those reps too. So it's a very different league, to call, but it was just as much fun. And when the Bulldogs played against the Toronto Marlies, you could count on a good 10,000 people down at First Ontario Centre because Hamilton only 45 minutes away from Toronto, so there was a lot of Leaf fans that would come down and want to see those prospects.
Yeah, and just before we go here on Behind the Mic, we have Steve Clark in this week, just wrapping up our chat here in a few minutes. But I wanted to make sure that I got a couple of minutes to talk to you about one of your other projects ongoing right now, which is Broadcast Booth Sessions, a podcast that you're hosting where you get to have conversations very similar to what we're doing here on Behind the Mic, where you get to check in with some of the great voices around sports. And one I just saw snippets from was you and Chris Cuthbert. So kind of comparing notes here a little bit, but what was kind of your process for launching broadcast booth sessions, and kind of what are you trying to get out of it?
Well, I started doing like a traditional podcast, just audio. I did 8 episodes. I was, booking the guests, editing, producing, researching, and I did find that to be time consuming. But when summer came along, I kind of wanted to do kind of like a TV show type of thing. My producer friend said, well, why don't we do something that we can put on YouTube? And I thought, well, that's a fantastic idea. I love, conversations like this in which we're just kind of shooting the breeze as if we're sitting in a pub or sitting in an arena or something like that, the informal interview style. And that's kind of what I wanted to get. And I wanted to I kind of wanted to cover the important stories of the NHL season, but I wanted to kind of do it through, the personalities that cover the games and call the games. So that's where, the idea for the guests. My first one was Brian Mudryk, who broadcast for the Montreal Canadiens. And they, of course, were a great story this year. But he was also down in Texas calling the under-18s. So he was the perfect voice to talk to because a lot of those guys were draft eligible. Then Sam Cosentino from Sportsnet, who does a ton of work for the draft. And then I got Chris Cuthbert, which was a great coup. I got through contact through a friend of mine who was a good friend of his. And, to get a guy who was probably the highest profile guy to switch from TSN to Sportsnet and talk about his experience in calling a Stanley Cup was just fantastic. And that's kind of what I wanted to kind of get at, was kind of encapsulate the season in hockey through the personalities that kind of covered it.
So who are some of the big time sports voices that you listened to growing up, or that you still listen to and watch now to kind of learn from? Who are some of the big influences for you?
Well, for hockey, there were 3. Bob Cole was always my guy. Saturday night, him and Harry Neal, fantastic. For Father's Day, my daughter and wife did the best thing for me is that they got a memo of Bob Cole wishing me a happy Father's Day, which to me was, in that, even though he's almost 90, it's still that signature voice, still wishing you a happy Father's Day. So he was one. Joe Bowen of the Toronto Maple Leafs was another. And Rick Jenneret from Buffalo, because we're kind of situated, nestled in between them. They were big influences. I listened to a lot of Jim Houston because he started with the Leafs. Those are the guys, and I really do. If I had to pick a guy today, it would be Dan Shulman. I just think he's fantastic, and I just love listening to whether it's basketball or baseball. He doesn't make a mistake. He's so smooth. He's got that voice that's enviable, and just does such a great job.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on the Dan Shulman note, and he would be an all-timer if I were ever able to connect with him for this. But of course, like we've talked about with me following the Blue Jays, I get to see him on some of the Sportsnet games right now. But even when he's doing Olympics or basketball or college basketball, one of the thoughts I've had with him And I actually had it a couple of weeks ago when he was calling a marathon 16-inning Padres game. There's a handful of broadcasters that can make me stop and watch or listen to a game or a sport that I wasn't otherwise interested in. And he is one of those. When he's been doing basketball in the qualifying tournament or the Olympics, I stop and watch games that I wasn't otherwise planning on watching because of him, and just to kind of enjoy him and study from him.
Couldn't agree more. He's such a signature style, definitive voice, and one of the great, Canadian guys who crossed over into the U.S. and had just as much success.
Oh yeah, that's a huge thing. I have had some conversations with some baseball people about the concept of being regional, and kind of Canadian people don't always translate to the U.S., but he's done it equal on both sides. But that's really impressive stuff from him. But Steve, thanks so much for spending the last hour or so with us. Was thrilled to be able to have you on and to have you share some of your time on a Friday night with us. We really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Before we let you go, do you want to let people know where they can connect with you, and where can we find your podcasts and your broadcasts and things like that?
Well, but first of all, thank you for thinking of me, and thank you for having me in a great hour of conversation that we had. I'm on Instagram at Steve Clark Media. Steve Clark Media is my Twitter handle, and that's where you'll find most of my links and things like that. I do have a YouTube channel that I'll link to as well. And just to let you know, I've got 2 more episodes of Broadcast Boost sessions. One is with Sean Fitzgerald of The Athletic, and we talk a lot about minor hockey and its return to play coming up this year. And then also my last one is a friend of mine from the U.S., Phil Jubileo, was the broadcaster of the Danbury Trashers, who have a documentary on Netflix right now called Crime and Punishment, or Crime and Penalties, I believe, because they were bought by a guy who had some alleged mob ties and had an interesting 2 years of hockey, and he was the play-by-play guy. So those are the last 2 episodes of the summer. But thanks a lot so much for having me, Jonathan. I look forward to keeping in contact.
Nice. We'll watch out for those for sure. And one more time, thanks so much for coming on. We're gonna toss to our final break here on Behind the Mic. Say goodbye to Steve. I'll be back solo for the next block on the other side of this break, and we will wrap up another week of Behind the Mic here on ASTV. And once again, one more time, welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. Jonathan Hodgson back with you to wrap up another week on the show. Great time this week talking to Steve Clark from McMaster University Athletics, where he is a play-by-play voice for football, basketball, and volleyball, as well as a television voice of the Niagara Ice Dogs. Ran through a whole bunch of things with Steve here this week. It was a great time talking McMaster, talking women's hockey, talking junior hockey, a little bit of baseball, and other things thrown in. So once again, thanks so much to Steve for joining us this week, and you can find him on his broadcast booth sessions podcast, and find him at Steve Clark Media on social media if you'd like to learn more about him. That was a great time, and that'll do it for our show here this week. Reminder, if you want to find this show and all of our archives of Behind the Mic, you can find us at astvproductions.com. That's where you can find all of our other shows and live game broadcasts across the ASTV network. And we will be back here same time, same place next Friday at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern with another chat with another great sportscaster. So thanks so much for making us part of your holiday Friday evening, wherever you've been tuned in from. This is Jonathan Hodgson saying thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again next week.